One of the things I observe is simply this. A lot of people are very careless with their language. And so, there's a huge shift. You can either be a victim or you can be a leader, but you can't be both. And if you look at someone who is a victim, a lot of their victimhood comes down to the words they use. I mean, the words you use either lift up your energy, the words you use either make you more creative, the words you use either allow you to do world-class things, or the words you use deny your talents. The words you use could reduce your energy. The words you use could hurt your leadership. So you have a choice every day at work and at home and out on the streets with strangers. You can develop a victim vocabulary or the language of leadership. And in this mastery session, I want to walk you through some of my insights on those. Well, words are powerful. I mean, words have destroyed nations. I mean, think about the great dictators. They're words of hatred. They're words of toxicity. They're words of breakdown. Caused the people around them to do sometimes incredibly terrifying acts. And then you look at people like a Nelson Mandela or a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Mother Teresa. You look at the great business builders. You look at humanitarians. You look at a lot of the great artists, and they were so careful with their words. And their words lifted people up. And that's really what great leaders do. They use the language of leadership. You look at a victim, and they say things like, "This is a problem. I've got a problem right here." Or, "I'm really scared about this." Or, "I hate that client." Or, "I hate this work." Or, "I'm sick of this day." Or, "I'm exhausted." Or, "I don't like that." Or, "She never likes me." It's literally the language of toxicity. And the words you use really are like a context or a framework or a stained glass window on the way you see the world. I mean, here's a game-changing insight. You see the world not as it is, you see the world as you are. You see the world through a lens, and your language forms that lens of belief. I mean, your lens of belief and your personal filter on reality is not really a true filter on reality. It's just the filter on reality that has formed as a result of all the words you've picked up from the moment you were born. So when you were a little baby, your mom and your dad used the language that they were taught when they were kids to use. And if they use the language of victimitis, and if they use the language of victimhood, like, "Well, you can't do this, I hate this, I'm tired of this, money doesn't grow on trees, be ordinary, if you're successful, you'll be hated." All that messaging that we pick up from our parents and the media and the world around us and our peers, the little kids that we used to play with in the playground, or the friends that we had as teenagers, that will either lift us up or tear us down. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and hopefully I'm making the point clearly for you, but we see the world through this personal filter, and a lot of this personal filter that drives our performance and our behavior is really constructed from the words that we've picked up and then the words we are taught to use. And so the right angle turn for you to create exponential energy, mindset, productivity, creativity, results in the world, results in your life, comes down to, in part, a really intelligent use of your words. And like I said at the beginning of this mastery session, most people are really unconscious about their words. And that's why most people are not getting rare air results. So what are some of the words I encourage you to shift from? Well, don't talk about what you hate to do. Talk about what you love to do. Don't talk about problems. Talk about opportunities. Don't talk about what makes you tired. Talk about what makes you inspired. Don't talk about your past. Talk about your future. Don't talk about what broke your heart. Talk about what opened your heart. Don't talk about what dispirits you. Talk about what you are fueled by. Don't talk about the things within your life that are not working. Talk about the things in your life that are working. Don't talk about your pain. Talk about your pleasure. And, if I were sitting with you right now coaching you, I am coaching you. And what I would encourage you to do as soon as I finish this mastery session is pull out your journal. And if you're not journaling, please start journaling, because journaling is a ritual you want to install into your days. Joan Didion said this: "I don't know what I think, until I write it down. Think about that. I don't know what I think until I write it down. And so in your journal after this mastery session, pull out a fresh page and draw a line down the center of the page and write about the language of victimhood and the language of leadership. And start to write down all the words you use and the sentences you employ that really are victim speak. And then in the other column, I want you to start writing down the language of leadership, the language that as of today you will be committed to using so that you start to use the language of someone who's world class. And I've given you some examples, but doing that exercise will make it really clear. And as you know, clarity breeds mastery. Bottom line is this: you are built to be a leader. You are not constructed to be a victim. And once you get your words right, you are going to start noticing daily shifts in your energy, your focus, your momentum, your confidence, and your output. And when you start getting those words right, you start lifting your professional life, your personal life to a whole new level of wow. And guess what? That is what you are meant to do.
Well, there's a couple of things. It helps to read a lot. It really helps to write. So if you want to make yourself articulate, which is a very good idea, then not only should you read, but you should write down what you think. And if you can do that a little bit every day, 15 minutes, maybe you could steal 15 minutes and do it every day. But if you do that for 10 years, you really straighten out your thinking. If you're going to speak effectively, you have to know way more than you're talking about. So this is often difficult for beginning lecturers at university because they'll do a lecture on a topic, but they only know as much as they're saying in the lecture. And they get kind of stuck to their notes because of it. But you want to know 10 times as much as you are saying in the lecture, and then you can specify a stepping path through it and elaborate with the other things that you know. But to do that, you have to do a lot of reading. But you also have to do a lot of reading because that's where the synthesizing comes. So that's on the input side. And then on the output side, well, there's some tricks. Techniques, let's say, is like if you're speaking in front of a group, you are not delivering a talk to a group. That's not what you're doing. The talk isn't a packaged thing that you present to a group. There isn't a group. There's a bunch of individuals, and you talk to them. So when I talk to a group, I always talk to people one at a time. And that makes it easier too, because you know how to talk to a person. It's like, can you talk to 1,000 people? Well, probably not, because it's too intimidating. But there isn't 1,000 people there. There's 1,000 individuals. And so you just look at an individual and you say something, and you can tell if they're engaged. They look confused, or they look interested, or they look angry, or they look bored, or maybe they're asleep, in which case you look at someone else. And they give you feedback about how you're doing. And so one thing is to have something to say, yeah. The next thing is pay attention to who you're talking to. Because unless you're very badly socialized, and that seems unlikely in your case because, you present yourself at least moderately well, Well, I don't know you very well, but on first sight, you're doing fine. So the probability that if you pay attention to the individuals that you're talking to, that your natural wealth of social skill will manifest itself is extremely high. And so you don't deliver a talk to an audience. That's a really bad way of thinking about it. You're actually engaged in a conversation with an audience. Even if they're not talking, they're nodding and shifting position and, looking like this, and you can pull all that in and use it to govern the level at which you're addressing the entire audience. So the last thing I would say is, well, having the aim to be a good communicator is a good start. And you think, well, I could buttress that to some degree. Well, there isn't anything that you can possibly, this is the whole point of a liberal education. There isn't anything that you can possibly do that makes you more competent in everything you do than to learn how to communicate. I don't care if you're going to be a carpenter. Being a carpenter, by the way, is very difficult, especially if you're a good carpenter. But if you're good at communicating as a carpenter, you're like 10 times better as a carpenter. So and this is something that the liberal arts colleges, I think, I don't know if they've forgotten it, but they don't do a very good job of marketing. It's like, well, what's the use of a bachelor's degree, a Bachelor of Arts? It's like, well, you can think, you can write, you can speak, you've read something. It's like, the economic value of that is incalculable. The people that I've watched in my life who've been spectacularly successful they have skills. Clearly, that's a minimum precondition, but they're also very, very good at articulating. And so whenever they negotiate, they're successful. Well, that's kind of like the definition of success in life, right? You negotiate and it doesn't mean you win. Because if you're a good negotiator, if you're a really good negotiator, everybody walks away from the negotiation thrilled. And so then people line up to do things with you. So, and that's all dependent on your ability to communicate. So practice.
I can say to you, continue to do what you're doing and working on yourself and working on your mindset and your presentation power. Because once you open your mouth, as he said, the world will now know who you are. Your ability, and write this down, to tell your story is key. It's major. And how you present yourself one-on-one. Why is that important, Mr. Brown? Because when you meet someone and you want to do business with them, people are asking 3 questions. One-on-one, small groups, or large groups. They're asking, who are you? What do you have? And why should I care? That's what they're asking. Because in the business where you are, trust is important, am I correct? Confidence is important, am I correct? There's a lot of skepticism around the industry because of things that have happened. A major investment that people have to make, am I correct? So now they're looking at you, who are you? And so your ability to tell your story. Who are you? What do you have? Your ability to communicate that in a way that will connect with people, in a way that will expand their minds, in a way that will touch their heart, in a way that will cause them to say, this is the person that I want to put my trust in. This is the person that I believe, and this major decision that our family is about to make now, that we should go with.
Connecting increases your influence in every situation. For the foundation of the teaching today, I want to make sure that we really have a grasp of why connecting with people is so vital. So if you'll go to the very first sentence in your note, the number 1 criteria for advancement and promotion for professionals is an ability to communicate effectively. That I do believe. I think the ability to connect and communicate is the number 1 criteria for success with your family, with your marriage, with your children, with your friends, in the workplace, the marketplace, in the community. If you have the ability to connect with people, if you can communicate and connect, not just communicate, it takes you and literally gives you and I a decided edge over others in the advancement of what we're trying to accomplish.
Many nervous speakers distance themselves physically. If you've ever seen a nervous speaker present, he or she will say something like this: "Welcome, I am really excited to be here with you." They pull as far away from you as possible because you threaten us, speakers. You make us nervous, so we want to get away from you. We do the same thing linguistically. We use language that distances ourselves. It's not unusual to hear a nervous speaker say something like, "One must consider the ramifications," or "Today we're going to cover step 1, step 2, step 3. That's very distancing language. To be more conversational, use conversational language. Instead of "one must consider," say, "This is important to you. We all need to be concerned with." Do you hear that inclusive conversational language? It has to do with the pronouns. Instead of step 1, step 2, step 3. First, what we need to do is this. The second thing you should consider is here. Use conversational language.
Anything you want to achieve, anything you want to learn, master, experience, there's somebody out there who has a life experience, the understanding, the network, the capital, the thing you need to be able to achieve it. But they're not going to give you what they want, or they're not going to give you what you want, rather, and need, until you first give them what they want and need. And you're not even going to find out what they want and need until you first get in a relationship of rapport. If you don't do that, you're never going to learn anything. Rapport is power. What is a relationship of rapport? Rapport means total responsiveness between people. When someone is totally responding to you, and you're totally responding to them, you're in rapport. There's that connection. It's that spark that happens in certain communications or relationships. Now, everybody wants to create rapport, have it, but most people only get rapport with people who are like whom? Themselves, and they lose with everybody else, which means you got a very limited world. So we want to take it to a different level. So let's say, for example, if I said to you right now, guys, I want you to go out to a local restaurant or bar, and I want you to meet somebody, and I want you to develop rapport with them, a connection with them. How many feel like you could do that? No problem. Say aye. And if you're not raising your hand, you're probably selling yourself short. Of course you could. How would you do it, though? You'd walk in this restaurant or bar, you meet somebody, and you'd engage them in conversation by asking a few what? Questions. Now, is it possible to ask a few questions and have the conversation go poof and just die? Is that possible? Yes or no? So questions don't create rapport. Questions are a tool we use to dig for something. What are you digging for when you're asking these questions? You're trying to find something in what? That's right. So write in your notes, rapport is created by a feeling of commonality. Rapport is created by a feeling of commonality. Rapport is created by a feeling of commonality. When we feel like we have something in common with someone, there's a spark. Now, here's the problem. If rapport is created by a feeling of commonality, most people try to get rapport by using words. But you've already learned something. What percentage of our communication skills are words? What percentage? 7%, which means you're leaving out 93% of your skills, which is why most people don't get rapport with a large number of people. You know, what do? You walk in a restaurant or a bar and go, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? Why are you here? And the person says, my name's Habib. I'm from Iraq. I'm a terrorist. I'm here to kill people. And you go, amazing. Me too. No. See, words don't always work, do they? But there is something that always works to get rapport, and it's something called matching and mirroring. Matching and mirroring. Now, matching and mirroring came about 35 years ago when we've all done matching and mirroring our whole lives. But the person who pointed out was Milton Erickson. Dr. Erickson was a genius. What he did was he was a medical doctor, but he also was a psychologist and a hypnotherapist, probably the best that ever lived. And people would come to see him who try to change everything anywhere else in their life, nothing would work. They see him for one session, he'd handle it. And the reason is because he understood something. He understood that you have both a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. And he knew the subconscious is more powerful. It's the part that makes your heart beat 100,000 times a day without having to think about it. So he knew if he could influence your subconscious mind, he could change anything, and that's what he did. But here's how he did it. He had polio, so he was in a wheelchair. So he spent an enormous amount of time studying people. And he began to notice something about human beings, that when human beings got together, if they got in rapport, a relationship of responsiveness, they became like each other in a variety of ways. What he called, they mirrored each other. Now, I've taught this for 25 years, so I'm sure you've heard of it, and I've written it in my books, and it's been taught in a variety of other areas now. But it's one thing to know it intellectually or to understand it. It's another thing to know it where you're doing it. And that's what I want to get you to do tonight, so you have a real experience of it that you won't forget. But here's the basis of it. People like people who are like whom? Themselves. And people don't like people who are not like themselves. To be more specific, write this down. People like people who are like themselves or who are like how they would like to be. People like people who are like themselves or are how they would like to be. People like people who are like themselves or how they would like to be. So question, I'd like you to think of someone you really, really like a lot. And then if you would, raise your hand if this person is either like you or they're like how you want to be. If that's true, raise your hand and say, I. Of course, that's why you like them. Now, think of someone you don't like. And I'm sure you like everyone, but if you once were an unspiritual person and felt these feelings, someone you don't like. Raise your hand if they're not like you or they're not like how you want to be. If that's true, raise your hand and say, I. And that's the opposite. People don't like people who are not like them or are not like how they want to be. That's the bottom line of it. So this concept, Erickson noticed, he used it in the following way. Watch me. If you came in to see Dr. Erickson, instead of talking to you intellectually and trying to get through to you, he'd go right for the jugular by getting your nervous system connected to him, getting rapport. So if you came to him and you said, Dr. Erickson, I don't know, this is a waste of time. I've tried everything and I don't know, I think I should just go. He would do this. He'd go, I'm sure it looks that way on the surface, but you haven't tried this, so you haven't tried everything, and I think you should stay. And the person would go, something about this guy I like. You know, he's not over the top, you know what I mean? He's like really real. There's just something about him that feels down home and real to me, right? If you came in to see him and he said, Dr. Erickson, I've tried everything. It's a waste of my time. I'm out of here. He'd say, you sit down. You haven't tried everything. You've not done this before. You're staying right here. Guy goes, hey, I like this guy. He's got some spunk, kick ass. Maybe he could do something. See, he became like the people he was communicating with. And what it was is whatever they put out, he sent the same message back, like biofeedback, and it entrained them to him. So that when he then told their unconscious what to do, their brain just did it. That was his power.